The idea for Ankh came about in 1997, during an adventure trip through Africa. We were big adventure fans at the time. We'd already developed a few games, and this was going to be our first big game, in which we wanted to show what we were capable of, which at the time worked pretty well, on a somewhat exotic computer platform. We made some other games at the same time, and in 2003 we were on the lookout for new concepts again, and we thought, wait, an adventure game, especially a humorous adventure game, something with a lot of fun, with crazy characters, and a story that really works with a game that's heavily based on the story. That should work well. The important thing with large productions is to create the concept for everything carefully. You need pen and paper, definitely, and we also have a large team where everybody has their opinion, which you would like to see realized, which means there has to be lots and lots of consultation in advance. So the tasks are clearly distributed. There's always a specialist for every area, and that person does the work in advance, sort of, though it is discussed in a group, including the respective persons. Everything will come to a terrible end. Thorsten looks after the whole technical side of Ankh, from basic development, the program that's needed, for example, for Ankh. And of course, he looks after the whole development. For example, if we have graphics, models, or right now, for example, characters or landscapes, then Thorsten has to build them in. And he has the most difficult position during the project, because all of the mistakes that all the people make, and they make mistakes all the time, he's the one that has to troubleshoot them in the end, or at least point them out to other people. And that was very exhausting for him. The log is sort of the error log of the program. It lists exactly who screwed up what. But the graphic artists usually get a kick out of clicking away the error messages as quickly as possible. It seems to be a big problem to look at a text file or read an error message. As soon as someone sees a button, they just click on it. And then, when you ask them about it, people don't even know what was in the error message. Yeah, that's a bit of a conflict area. But we have fun anyway. The most respect that was also received in public was Ogre. That's the rendering engine that takes care of the actual presentation of the three-dimensional scene. And of course, there are other reasons why this component in particular was perceived like that. For one thing, it's the largest component, and for the player, of course, the most important one, because in the end, what the player sees is what's happening on the screen. If that happens to be handled by Ogre, then it's obvious, then that's what's going to interest people, and not just... But Ogre is acknowledged to be the best, one of the best, or in my opinion, really the best freely available 3D engine or rendering engine that can be used for commercial purposes. Of course, we have a few problems to contend with. That's always the case. With Ankh, our biggest problem was simply time. For the core phase of the implementation, we only had, let's say, 10 months. And that's very little time for a game with so much content. And so we had to work in a very organized way, very strict. And we always had the problem that things had to be finished at the same time. And things didn't quite work in the story, but we didn't really have the time to completely change things around again. And we very quickly had to get together and change our plans and come up with new things. And I think that worked out very well, because simply everyone in the team was very creative and kept coming up with ideas for how to solve certain problems, how to make puzzles more suspenseful and exciting, how to change a gag maybe. And that just always worked very well in our collaboration, otherwise we never would have made it. So if the team hadn't worked together as tightly as was the case here, we never could have finished this game in that time. The fact that we made it in such a short time with so few people, that just shows that the atmosphere within the team is extremely good. Because, well, if there had been tension, I mean real tension between some of the people, this wouldn't have worked at all. That's why, especially towards the end, we were under a lot of pressure, because it was just so stressful. But we only managed it because everything worked so well, including between the people.
Nur weil es insgesamt so gut funktioniert hat, auch zwischen Menschen.
The person I dealt with the most was Maxim. Maxim took the lead in looking after the design of the levels in Ankh. Well, level design means that you first come up with a conception of the world in which all this takes place. And so, for one part, it's an important factor that it works with the story. And also, as far as style goes, that it looks good in the end, that it has interesting parts, but also that all the technical aspects are taken into account. And finally, level design, from the graphical side, is an area where a lot flows together before it goes into the engine. So it's a kind of management of all kinds of things. Basically, I would love to handle it by sitting down directly in a 3D application. But experience has shown that for reasons of coordination, or just to work faster, that it's worth to make sketches first, then talk about them in a group, get suggestions from other people before you start building things, because it does take a lot more time if you have to change things later on. It's not necessary to be able to look in all directions. It's more like a stage set, like in a theatre or something. So that if you're in the game and you turn the camera completely in the other direction, you could see that the world stops right away. So I've seen the end of the world many times. Robert, he joined our team at the time. That's Robert Sander. For Ankh, I did the 2D, 3D things, particle effects, levels. I'm Susie Sue. Susie, in the course of the project, was sliding more and more into the creative ideas. And so suddenly I was thrown in at the deep end, and suddenly had to do everything from levels. We had too many people building levels. Armin did the scripting for Ankh and pulled it all together so that all the quests worked. Florian Stadlerbauer is actually known as the Darth Vader around here. He's the one who has to take on all the evil jobs, and of course he's very grateful for that. Of course, it's legendary that time he came out of the train wearing this Egyptian mask. Gregor is our animator. Well, Gregor is really... His thing is, what's the point of that? That fits more or less anything you tell him. No, you just have to cut it out later. Don't introduce me. It's going to be real short, just a quick comment. He brings all the characters to life. He makes them talk to each other, and so that they have different facial expressions, that they can show emotions. What we really liked about the German voice recording was that we were able to get some well-known voices for Ankh. We got, for example, Thomas Dannenberg, who does John Cleese's voice, and who also does Arnold Schwarzenegger's voice, and many other well-known German voice actors. And he did the voices for Elan with a lot of fun and pizzazz. He does 4 parts altogether, including the Mummy, the Start Mummy, and he also speaks the Gate of Hell, and he really worked his way into that role very nicely and put a lot of energy into it. For us, a completely new part was the translation of such a text-heavy game into different languages. The game at this point has been sold in 6 or 7, maybe even more languages across the world, and we put a good bit of effort to transfer the humour into other languages. Fortunately, we had very good translators helping us. And finally, it was just a lot of fun to see the game work in different languages. The familiar characters, the story we came up with, suddenly to hear it in Russian or in French, that was really a lot of fun.
You have desecrated my tomb.
The coffee. The coffee alone went through an amazing development. We were finally forced to buy an amazing, fully automatic coffee machine that really makes the tastiest coffee, which was made even more expensive because we only use fair trade coffee and had to find an especially creamy type of fair trade coffee bean.
Also eigentlich bin ich keine Kaffeetrinkerin, aber ich habe mit
I'm not really much of a coffee drinker, but I did like watching when somebody managed to blow up the coffee machine.
Kaffeegerät explodieren zu machen.
I'm glad we kept the thing. I didn't know about that.
Ja, beim Deutschen Entwicklerpreis war ich auch dabei und wir sind ja eigentlich dahin gefahren.
For the German Developer Award, I was there for that too. We drove down there and thought we would get some kind of award, the one for best sound and best music, because the people who did that did extremely good work in that area. But the award for best German game is something we, or me personally, didn't count on at all. It completely blew me away. Winning the German Developers Award 2005, we really didn't expect that. We were really, really happy and we had a big party. We were really blown away in every sense of the word, because this thing here is very, very dangerous. I don't think it's properly certified, and it's very, very heavy. It may not look it, and it has very sharp edges, and I think somewhere on one of the corners there's still a bit of blood from our animator. He was so happy, he lifted this thing up and he hurt himself during that. Yeah, Gregor had to suffer the same fate as a few of our other award winners that night. I'm sure it was intentional. In any case, Ankh will go on.